Alright, I'm starting the recording. I'll edit it later. But I mean, you guys who are here, you know what's happening. So I'm gonna show you the context, the contextual information for the theory I'm about to present to you to make sense. First, to explain Roswell, we need to cover the aerial UFO incident. So we're going aerial UFO school incident. I don't know what was showing. Probably all my homework memes. Anyways. On 16 September 1994, there was a UFO sighting. Why did my thing move? Okay, so yes, this is just to show you that it's veridical. I'm not going to read to you the whole thing. You can come and check it out. The date is accurate, September 16th, UFO sighting outside Zimbabwe, and then 62 pupils. Oh, okay, I had the number wrong. It was double. It's even more than I thought there were. And yes, so they were all dressed in black, and then they approached the children and telepathically communicated to them a message with an environmental theme, frightening the children and causing them to cry, which in a lot of UFO and religious encounters, there is a correlation between the theme of the visitation, which I would like to go into detail right now. Okay, so we have this established. Just to add context to this context, I'm gonna show you the other story that I'm using these two stories as the foundation for the thesis that I'm presenting to you right now, and that is the encounter of the Lady of Fatima. Fatima apparition. Our Lady of Fatima, and here it tells the story of how the Lady of Fatima presented herself to three kids. Here, the Marian apparitions happened from 16, and no, the first encounter from 1916, and then on May 13th, 1917, all the way to October 13th of 1917. So pretty much, these fellows right here, they had pictures. They're cool. They saw Lady of Fatima appearing in front of them as depicted right here. Here, let's take a look at it. That's kind of how it looked. And she also told them a foreboding message about the future. A message of, well, let me tell you the prophecies. The Fatima prophecies. The three secrets of Fatima. Here we go. The three secrets. The first secret is a vision of hell. Just telling you what hell looks like. Which I am going on a limb here and assuming that the hell described by Fatima here in the first secret is the same thing the visitors from the aerial UFO incident are talking about. Because they also talk about a future, like a dystopian future. And I would assume that in 1917, the little poor Victorian shepherd kids who happened to come across the apparition of the Virgin of Mary being mantled through Fatima would rationalize it as, oh, that has to be hell. It's horrible. There's no way something like that is real, only in hell. But hell would be in the future. And, ooh, it's cooking. Hold on. It's fine. Oh. Anyways, the second secret refers to the devotion of the Immaculate Heart of Mary initially portrayed by various prophets. Yes. This is foreshadowing for World War I. And the third secret, I'm just skimming through this. The point is to show you that this exists. Oh, I hope the one viewer is very engaged by this because I am having a lot of fun explaining it. The one viewer. Okay, so then the third secret, well, what was it about? Blah, 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 blah. The third part of the secret was by order of His Excellency the Bishop of Valeria. It's the foreshadowing of the death of some guy that's important in the church. I guess, from my perspective, all of those three secrets is just the consciousness that manifested itself as the Lady of Fatima used the colloquially known understanding of the Bible in order to express a larger idea that would otherwise not be transmitted as efficiently as it could. And I think this is the case because of the negative connotation the aerial UFO incident had. And you could say, but my friend Abestel, our fellow streamer, this happened after this. How would that make sense? And this is where I'm gonna explain that to you. Let me. Oh, hold on. I'm cooking something very interesting here. Let me pull up the whiteboard. Alright. Here's the whiteboard. Now I'm going to explain to you time travel. The way I see it using these two events as explanation for it. Okay. So first we are gonna get, let me get a clear color. Has to be green though. So we have Ariel right here, and we have Fatima over here. The way I'm telling you that it's happening, it's that Ariel happened first and Fatima not second but later. We don't know how many other alien encounters we had until they understood how to communicate properly with Fatima. And I'm not saying Fatima was the first successful time they've ever done this. It's just because of the nature of how these entities displace themselves, they're essentially interlopers. Because we don't have to, like, while this is linear for the aliens, it's not linear for humanity. For humanity, it just looks like they're here, then they're here, then they're here, then they're here, and they're here, and they could be here, and then they're here, and then they're here. It's like wibbly wobbly, timey wimey. Very much so. But anyways, for the aliens, we're just like, oh, what? Floop, 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 floop. That's kind of how it works. So I argue that the very first time they had an encounter with us as a species was Ariel. This is the beginning of their story with us. But we already know them. So how it works is, okay, I need to make a new canvas for this. Because in order to, no, cancel. New. Yes. In order to explain how this is possible, we have to understand where they come from. And this is where we're going to look at the timeline from our perspective. Okay, so now, here. And then we have the think emoji. This is humanity. Like, we could imagine this is like the Big Bang. Sure, why not? And then from here, our timeline goes up to here. Let's say this is this isn't the present. Actually, let's say it's the present for all intents and purposes. Sure, why not? We have all of this magic here where the dwellers of heaven are, and they're just sending all their energy through the cosmos, expanding the universe. And at some point, little civilization is created, probably like around here. Everything mystical and magical, like that we have information on, but I'm just not going to go into deep detail of, happens like all here. And this is where humanity is. And then everything we know of from our perspective happens right here. However, that wouldn't be true for our alien homies. Hold on, that's a little kokoro. But that's a nice heart right there. So I argue that they actually come from the end of time. So in order for them to exist, they have to come from somewhere. And because we don't know where we come from, we can only use ourselves to assume that we eventually get here. I mean, and that's sure it could be a little pompous to assume that the only other humanoid species that could ever exist would be based on humanity. However, I think that they look like humans because of how they first interacted with us. So, anyways, here's humanity. Here is all of the little UFO encounters that we can't really rationalize, but they're happening. And they don't even exist yet, but they're still there. Like, everything is getting. ¿Cómo se dice? The timeline is taking care of itself in order for the things that haven't happened to still happen in the past when they're supposed to happen, because from the future to the past they already happened. It's just they haven't happened from the present to the future. But anyways, so my argument here, I'm gonna open another canvas to show you how the time travel theory works from my perspective. Again, here is the timeline. I've already drawn this, and this is just to say this is humanity without like the Big Bang and everything. And let's say humanity starts like around here. So this would be one human experience, like, or maybe not one human, but like a collection of human experiences. And so the collection of human experiences, as we go along further and further, it starts to like coalesce into something greater than itself. We call this the world tree. This is Yggdrasil, essentially. According to my theory, this would be Yggdrasil in the timeline. It exists outside of like the theater, essentially. It exists within space-time. And let's say that if this is how the timeline is represented of all time, that the aliens essentially came from here. The furthest point of human development, or what used to be human at some point. Whoop, whoop. There's some funky things that happen over here. The tree just grows. And on every little branch, there is something I like to call a traveler's anchor. And I will illustrate it right here. So this is a traveler anchor. This would be another one. This would be another one. And just for brevity's sake, I'm not going to give one to each branch, but assume that each one has a branch. And that each traveler anchor would be stronger or weaker than the other one. However, so let's say that the creators, this is when we unlock the order. That we're talking, where the aliens cannot manifest themselves from. Bloop. But they haven't manifested yet. We only care about the orb itself. The orb comes from here. Essentially, you have to get to the end of time. You have to push consciousness to such a degree that it condenses itself in some sort of super matter, you could say, that is able to withstand the conditions outside of space-time. And the technology necessary for such biomaterial to withstand that pressure would be the chromatic sheet that the orb described in the aerial UFO encounter has. So my argument here is that essentially we forget we were humans, or that we came from Earth at some point around like right here. And then we're just going to evolve a different way. We have the cognitive ability to think for ourselves and to know like what we would want to do for an optimal vessel for survival in the vacuum of space, I guess. So we would slowly start losing human features, and we would look more of like a mycelium core of sorts. If you've ever seen Magic the Gathering, I like to picture it as looking a lot like Emrakul here. Ooh, that is what is inside of the orb. We essentially have Emrakul inside the orb, a mycelium core that protected itself in order for them to go further. But from their perspective, there is nothing after this line. They're technically they're like right here. The next Kalpa would be right there. But instead of going backwards, from their perspective, they're going forwards, which is backwards in our perspective. So once the orb is unlocked, they would essentially transport themselves to the nearest possible traveler anchor available to them. Once they're able to do that, then they can start finding more traveler's anchors. Perhaps they even start seeing different possibilities. Like it might actually take them a while because this is our tree, but just because they came from here doesn't mean they came from like our specific tree. Let's say this. Imagine there is a grid of as many world trees, and this point is true for all the world trees available. So this happens in every other world tree. But this is the only world tree that happens to have human life. So from this point, the orb might go like traveling here, 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 here. Who knows how long it actually takes them to get here? And all that time, the orb has no expectations on what life is supposed to look like. It's just, okay, there's an orb. The orb manifests itself on like a barren wasteland. Here, so let's say this is some rocky terrain, a mountain, like a sulfur pool, and the orb just happened to materialize itself here, and it has nothing better to do with its gigabrain that is inside here, just very smart. So it's like, okay, I'm going to collect as many samples and as much data as I can from this location. So it would just scan the area, find a suitable vessel to go ahead and collect said data. It would render it, and it would show, like, I don't know, a little maybe Venusian creature of sorts would spawn, and it would go gathering the intel. And then it would go back to the orb, and the orb would be like, oh yeah, it's very interesting. There seems to be a lot of this particular material in this reality. But at this point, it's just like the orb is bored more than anything. So it's just like, I unlocked omniscience, essentially. Let me have as much fun with it as possible. And eventually, they get to Ariel. So how I think this works is the orb doesn't have as much control over where they're going, at least at first, because they wouldn't have a baseline to like expect anything. So when they go from here to here, and it's their third time not seeing any sort of life, it's just, okay, we're just gonna do our thing. Then at some point, the collection of all those kids in that place in space-time makes such a strong beacon that it shines from, and it's been able to be seen from every other world tree, to the point that the orb is drawn to it, like it's irresistible. It's like, what is going on? I must know what is causing this spike for the traveler anchor to be being picked up in this fashion. So then the orb gets with the kids in Zimbabwe, and it does its thing, scans the area. It happened that there were kids around, so when it creates the drone that it's using to scan the area, it creates a little alien, because it replicates what's around the area in order to create it using its super mycelium stem cell based material. It's essentially a super 3D printer, if you want to. It's a 4D printer, a 5D printer, if you want to see it that way. Okay, then let me open a new one right here. So then the orb sees all the little kids. Well, it doesn't see them because it doesn't have eyes. It doesn't see the same way we do. That's what the drones are for. So let's say it gets there, and a little scanner just like scans the area for any forms of intelligence, of life, of energy, and through that process, it picks up the kids. And when it picks up the kids, it's like, oh, okay, so this is the optimal vessel for this area of the trees that I'm visiting, of the realms, essentially. So out of there, loop, bololoing, 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 a little gray alien is created. Ooh, hello, I am here to collect data and spook kids, and I'm all out of data. Well, that's not the actual intention, but that is what ended up happening. So then we have the alien, and it's going to do the same thing that this thing has been doing. Hold on, hold on. There. It's just never had to deal with this. Wah. So it's very confused. And in an attempt of calming their issues, is like, hey, don't worry, we're not gonna mess with you. It attempts to communicate with the kids. And by doing so, it scares them even more. Now it's like, why would you talk to me like that? Alright, and here we have the alien attempting to establish the psychic link with the kids. However, something very interesting happens here. So, given the inexperience the mycelium orb would have at this point in space-time, it wouldn't really account for where the kids are. It would only account for how do we make this vessel, like these blueprints that we scanned, how do we make them as optimal as possible for our purposes, which is just collect data. Okay. So it would, for one, we know the descriptions. They don't really have. They have like an ugly mug. It looks like they're always smelling a fart or something. They look like they're mad, and it's not fair to them. It's just they were created without accounting for the need to express visual emotions in a very similar way to like a reptile would, you know? Because let's say iguanas are just like that, like they don't smile, but you know that they have emotions. Just because they're not there like doesn't mean they're not happy. And it's the same thing with this. It's just their resting face leaves much to be desired with how similar they look to us. So it's like, oh no, they're always pissed off, and that can create some problems. Ooh, more like that. Ooh. Ooh. Alright, let me. Eeny, meeny, bobini. And this one's gonna be smoke. Okay. Anyways. So I need a new canvas for this. File new. We have Gray Alien 1 establishing a connection with 64. Hold on, I don't want to use a different color for this. With 64 little kids. You can't probably see their vessel very well. It's just like because they're all there. It probably just looks like a raspberry to them or something, you know? Boop. It doesn't understand that there's like a sentient vessel in the accumulation of all this energy. It just sees the energy. I mean, eventually, the second one is rendered to help the skill issue that this one had. Because even though this worker bee drone can't figure out that he's not equipped to deal with these kids, the orb recognizes that the first one was made maybe a little too hasty. So it's like, let me give you a second one. And there comes the gray number 2. And this one's a lot nicer. And it's like, hey, I think you might be scaring them. You can cool it down. But by that point, it's a little too late because the communication was already established. And the funny thing is, the orb didn't account for the way in which humanity communicates between one another already. It's just thinking as a mushroom would. And as a mushroom, all it would be concerned with is being able to establish a communication between all of its little drone fellas. Here, let me... Here. Put it up. Put it up. Put it up. As long as this is happening, it's cool. But I mean, the energies from this were so strong that they recognized that this was needed. But anyways, when this was created, it was using the same neural link system that it's using to communicate with the mycelium ware to also communicate with the kids. So it ends up looking a little bit like this. However, this all works both ways. So when he establishes a connection with all 64 kids at the same time, he is sending. So this is very important here. Sorry, I keep saying he. My heteronormativism is showing. Excuse me. They are establishing. So, okay. I'm getting my idea straight. Right. I'm making certain assumptions about how the psychology of these worker bee gray alien drones would work. I would assume that because they're based on kids, that they would function similarly to humans. And as humans, we know that when we think about things, for the most part, we're able to, in a way, conjure psychic images of what we're thinking about in our head. Here. Let me... right here. You see, like, when you think of an apple, and this is a funny example because there's a meme going on around it, that you visualize the shape of the apple in your head. That's not a very good apple, but that's not the point. Here we go. Here's an apple. Hi. And you'll see the apple in your mind the way you imagine apples to be. And that is creating the psychic image of the apple. So when this sort of communication is established, a sort of psychic image of the kids would be generated within the gray alien's mind. And then the gray alien would interpret the psychic image not of the moment they're living, but it would essentially read the collective whole life journey that the kids would live based on the traumatic nature of the experience they're currently living. Which, remember, this guy doesn't get that it's traumatic for them. So the way the gray alien sees it, here, let's just use one kid as an example. So let's say he views, this is not the right color, I'm very particular. This is one kid, and the kid, from this moment in space-time, his whole life backwards and in the future is seen at the same time by the gray alien. And the gray alien has no skill issue interpreting this information. It's not it's not sure what to do with the information. So it tells them what it's seeing, because it's like a computer just outputting a result. It's like, hey, you added 2 + 2, it's 4. Except this quantum computer is just seeing their whole lifespan. However, the information received by the alien would be completely determined by the connotation of the events in which this is happening. So even though this event, like, this is the event that it's reading, this is the past of the kids, and this is the future of the kids, what happens here is that because of the interaction with the aliens and the kids, instead of reading what the future would be for them, it's reading this future. It's reading a future that is completely affected by the event of the mind reading itself is happening from. So even though their life doesn't necessarily have to be like this is what the alien is seeing. And the alien, in turn, tells this to the kids, further cementing the idea that this event is going to happen. Now, this alien might not get it immediately. This alien might get it somewhat, but the orb itself understands this information in a different way than like the drones would. The orb feels as though this is the cause of this. Like that the orb intervening in the kid's life caused the dystopian future that is talked about in the prophecies that the great aliens gave us. Pretty much everything we have from this event is distilled from this timeline that was extrapolated based on the traumatic experience that the kids had when they met the gray alien. So while this was the future at some point, I argue it doesn't have to be the future anymore. And I'm not saying that these guys are perpetuating that future. I don't think they particularly want that future. If anything, I would argue that the reason they're so prolific within all of our timelines is because like the fact this happens in the first place is because the orb feels guilty that it caused this to happen, because the orb assumes the only reason they saw that future, and I mean, to be fair, it's true, the only reason that future even got from here to here to here to here is because they arrived at this point in the world tree. So as a result, they would be traveling back and forth all over the tree trying to compensate for what they did. Be like, how do we make this right? Because it's not fair, just because we were interloping, we completely ruined a whole world tree essentially. And that's why Roswell happens. So essentially after here, the orb would be traveling from point to point to point to point to point, trying to learn as much about this culture as possible, since from their perspective, they're the ones who messed it up. So it's like, shit, maybe there's something we can do. Team Magma. Yes. Alright, so then they go back here, and then they eventually go to Roswell. And then in Roswell, we'll fire my boys. And, you know, the mycelium orb never had to worry about getting artillery shot its way, especially anything that could properly harm it. So then Roswell happens because from our human perspective, let me go back to here. From our big brain human perspective right here, that's more of a hat than a big brain, but you know, it still works. We assume that the only reason this happens is because of them. And they assume that the only reason this happens is also because of them. So we want to get rid of them as much as they want to get rid of this. But because we're not working together, some problems are arising, essentially. Because we here with our big brains don't understand their nature. But they here, their brains are so big, they can't properly explain their own nature. And that's what I'm attempting to do with this stream right now, at least with this segment of the stream. And, well, I'm also recording it so I can edit this later. And this is part one of, if anything, I might continue this, of how I'm trying to understand aliens. The perspective from which I'm trying to do so, which is a more psychological one. Like, I'm not questioning whether there's actually rendered gray alien vessels walking around somewhere in some sort of cabal secret organization or not. Even if that's true, which I actually do believe, it's irrelevant to what I'm trying to prove over here. Okay? It doesn't make a difference. Okay, and well, there we go. I'm gonna stop the recording now. And I hope that someone somewhere learned something.